Hello, folks. An impromptu World War II TV rambling today. It's not going to be very long, and I didn't announce it in advance. I'm just expressing some thoughts. So yesterday, I had an encounter, an exchange with someone on Facebook, and I won't go into the details, but he expressed the idea about the men who landed on Omaha Beach, kind of willingly giving their lives to make the world a better place. And it got me thinking about something that Donald R. Burgett in A Company 506, who wrote Currahee, A Screaming Eagle in Normandy, and Seven Roads to Hell about Bastogne. And Don was a good friend of mine. He passed away a few years ago. His wife passed away last week or the week before, so end of an era. And he said to me, Woody, he said, those men and women under the crosses and stars of David and gravestones, they didn't give their lives. They gave their service, and their lives were violently taken away. And in thinking about that, it just got me thinking about the generalities we make when we speak for the veterans, we speak for the greatest generation. And it always makes me feel uncomfortable. You'll see it in the news, a politician or someone will say, oh, the veterans wouldn't have wanted this, or the men who gave their lives in World War II wouldn't have wanted what we have today. And I've learnt one thing from veterans, and it is that they had as many different views about life as the rest of us, and some were there because they willingly stepped forward and volunteered. Some were there because they were drafted. Someone were there and they had no sense of the world being a bigger place or a better place. They were just trying to protect their buddies beside them and do a job to not let them down. Others had very good solid ideas and visions for the future. Perhaps they thought about a better working environment. Perhaps they were thinking about more equality, but some of them weren't. I mean, let's not forget, most of them were barely out of their teens, these guys. And one of the things with World War II TV is language. We talk about it a lot. Remember when we talked with Dr. Chris Millington a couple of years ago about the words resistance and collaboration, how they come loaded. Resistance, the implication is that someone's going out and blowing up trains every day, and collaboration is they're a dirty turncoat who's taking off downed Allied pilots to the Gestapo for money. And Dr. Millington suggests the words defiance instead of resistance, and what's the other word? Accommodation in terms of collaboration. And as we read different books, and we read books from different eras, we talk about historiography on the channel, and we've got 80 years of writing about the war that we're all interested in, from people who fought in it, who the memoirs written just after war, generals, people at a senior level who'd made the decisions to do World War II, to now an era of people who were born generations after the war, who are speaking about the world, speaking about the war, but they're using archives, they're using oral histories. And so it's just a kind of random thought, really. And I think my advice, and it's not that I'm some guru of knowledge, I'm just a bloke who talks about this stuff, is that putting words and generalities into that generation, or indeed any generation you served, I think is inherently problematic. Grouping them into having a particular set of values or particular set of ideals is a bit dodgy. I mean, I even have problems with the term greatest generation. I don't think that's how the men and women who were that generation would consider themselves that. But also, to me, it takes away a sense of, but what's the point of carrying on as human beings? If the greatest generation was the generation who served in World War II, what's the point of carrying on? Surely it's better to aspire that there'll be generations in the future who have better ideas, better visions, who won't have to go to war to sort their problems out. Maybe they'll be more concerned with life. And that's not saying that the greatest generation were obsessed with death or anything like that. I just think it's a very, they were the greatest. Yeah, we can't beat that now. I think it's weird. I think, and also it puts a label on every single one. And one of the things that annoys me a little bit, and thanks everybody for joining me, I just suddenly did this, is that, when people say, oh, they were all heroes. Yeah, most of them were. Most people who wore khaki or green or brown in World War II, or blue if they're in the Air Force, most of them are heroes, but not all of them. Some of them shirked their duties. Some of them deserted. Some of them, but people who deserted for very good reasons. They were suffering from what we would now call PTSD, but some were just not good people. I mean, millions of people served in uniform in World War II. And as I said, the great majority of them were good people. But I meet people all the time. Most of them are very good. Every now and then you meet a wanker, don't you? You meet someone who's just a bit of an asshole. And saying that they all, taking on board these ideas that everybody who served in World War II was a hero, I just think it's not allowing us to be nuanced about it and understand that people have had different motivations, they had different characters. And with millions in uniform, they had millions of different outlooks on life. So it's just some ramblings, really. I'm not going to be here very long because, frankly, I'm going to the pub later on with Colin and a few other people who have been on World War II TV. We're over in Normandy. Nick Bard, who did the MG42 show, is going to be in the pub later on. So that'd be quite cool. It's just this idea. So, if you're making a post on social media and you're talking about how you visited a cemetery or you've read a book or something, again, my advice is don't necessarily speak for that generation and feel that you can predict or suggest what it was they were fighting for. World War II had people who were racists serving in it. And I don't just mean the Nazis. I mean the organizations, the segregated U.S. Army, for example, things like that. There were people with positions of responsibility who were not nice people. Our values have changed in the 80 years since World War II. So I just think these blanket terms like they were all heroes and God bless them all and we owe every one of them a thank you. And they're mostly correct. They're mostly correct. Most people I've met who served their countries in World War II were good people, but not all of them. And they would often talk about the guys, the veterans I knew would talk about that one guy in the unit who was let people down, who was, conniving or stole other people's kit or was frankly a coward, and it's not by admitting that we're not saying that they all were. We're saying that some were of one type and some were of another type. And just like the rest of us, they are human beings. And it's this, it also touches on this idea of this maybe over celebration of the last few World War II veterans, putting them on a pedestal that is so impossibly high. They've become such figures of virtue and celebration. And, the veterans I knew were great people. But I think we're worshipping them a bit beyond where they would feel comfortable and a bit beyond the nuance of what it was. I'll tell you a story about a veteran. And he was being interviewed in Normandy about why he volunteered, and the news team were had all the cameras rolling and what have you. And he said, well, I was here because, and he was very eloquent, this particular chap. He said, I was here because the jackboots of Nazi tyranny were marching their way across Europe. And I, as a red-blooded young man, felt the only thing I could do was to step forward, go to the front of the queue and enlist and do what I could to defeat that enemy. And you can see the director who's behind the camera person thinking, well, this is gold. I'll put this out on this is an anniversary, by the way. I'll put this out, there. And the interview was duly finished and the veteran came back and joined me and the rest of his friends, and one of us said, was that really why you enlisted? He said, no, I enlisted because my mates did, and I wasn't serving alongside them to bring freedom to the world. I now realize that was the venture I was part of. Now I'm an elderly man. I have the wisdom to understand exactly what World War II was about, and I had seen at first hand liberation of concentration camps. But what I was fighting for at the time wasn't that. So he said to him, why did you say that then? He said, because I felt that's what they needed. That's what they wanted. It's like those, I'm going off on a rabbit hole now, those talent shows. I don't watch those talent shows, the X Factor type things, but everybody has to be on there for a very worthy reason. My mum battled breast cancer, and so I'm here in tribute to my mum, or I want to bring a voice to the minorities of so-and-so from so-and-so, and that's why I'm here singing you this song. Elvis Presley, for example, always just said he wanted to buy his mum a car and have a better house. I mean, he did bring joy to the world with rock and roll and his music, but that wasn't necessarily the reason he did it. He wanted to get himself out of a poverty-stricken childhood. When I was in a band very, very briefly in my sort of late teens, if I thought I would get laid. I didn't, but that was my motivation. I didn't have any idea that I was going to be changing the world. So I think putting and imposing values on these veterans to make them sound worthy. I can understand why it happens, but I don't know that it's necessarily a wise thing. Okay. So, they were human beings. Were multifaceted. They had flaws, most of them. They had, things that they did that they perhaps weren't proud of. And yes, and collectively, the effort of good joke there, Spank Flaps. Elvis was caught in a trap. They collectively were part of this cause of good that did bring about an end of the Third Reich and the Axis and the Japanese and what have you. But that doesn't mean that they were going out there as sort of good Samaritan figures with this idea of spreading love and bringing peace. Some of them maybe had that in their mind, but a lot of them it was they were drafted or they volunteered and they had naivety, teenage exuberance and enthusiasm, and they just did their bit. And so I will bring things to an end because I didn't want this to be a long thing, but maybe it'll stir some feelings in what you think about this. And I'd be very much welcome your comments about language and greatest generation and labeling these veterans with senses of ideals. Again, I was in my own time, I was in front of a museum in Normandy, and a tour guide was talking to a group of middle-aged Americans, and he was saying that don't forget that these people that died that we're paying tribute to here, they died for your right for, and I won't say what it was an opinion about something that some people watching will share that opinion, and some will have the opposite opinion. It doesn't matter which one it was, and I it wasn't my tour group. I jumped in. I said, "Excuse me, they didn't die for that principle. They died for the right for discourse to decide in a democracy how to sort these things out. They didn't die for this or against this. They died, if they died for that, as I say, I don't know that most of them enlisted for that reason, but collectively, we can now look back at World War II and realize it was part of an idea to make the world a better place. It did make the world a better place. It didn't make the world a perfect place. There were lots more wars, lots more conflicts. Think about the people who fought in World War II for the Allies from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, who had to live through generations of more communism and bitterness. Think about the civil wars and the independence wars that happened in India and Greece and things like that. Think about the countries that spent decades or more rebuilding. It was a big, big price paid, but the world was a better place. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were kind of fighting for that ideal at the time. Jerry Downs, just a comment there, is a journalism phrase, greatest generation. War said you should never use such phrase if you could possibly avoid it. Yeah, I kind of think that, we understand what it means and it sounds really good. They were the greatest generation, and I've used it, and people who are guests of mine on the channel use it as sort of subtitles of their book, A Member of the Greatest Generation. I have no problem with it in that context, but I just think speaking for that generation and assuming they had a single set of values, a single set of ideas, a single set of objectives, and they were all good people is problematic. There were idiots who served in World War II, just like there are idiots around today. So that's my words of wisdom, or maybe not wisdom. Maybe you think, what is he on about? What has he been on? Has he been eating the cheese he found under the fridge? No, I haven't been eating cheese or smoking anything weird. I've just had this thought from this encounter I had yesterday on Facebook, and I thought I would just express it. So there we are. We're back properly tomorrow night with a show about the Hermann Göring division in Salerno and Italy generally, and we've got more shows coming your way. But that's it. Just some thoughts. We'll see what happens, whether people like it or don't like it, whether I piss people off. I don't really care. I've got an opinion, and indeed, my opinion is different to other historians. That's how it works. In the pub tonight, I expect we'll have different ideas about what the best machine gun was or whatever it would be. So anyway, cheers everybody. I'll see you all next time. It's Paul Woodadge for World War II TV. And if you just happen to catch this show, don't forget you can support us by being a patron or YouTube channel member and share what we're doing on social media. But other than that, cheers everybody. Have a good one. Bye.